Hi everyone. Today we are going to discuss about one of the most important phase diagrams, which is known as iron-carbon phase diagram. It is important because the backbone of the industrial relation lies on the iron and carbon phases. And this iron-carbon phase diagram will basically give you an insight into steel and cast iron. We are not going to be able to go into the full details, but hopefully by the end of this video, you will be able to sketch the portion of the iron-carbon phase diagram relevant to cast irons and steel. Given the composition of a steel alloy, you will be able to specify whether the alloy is hypo or hypereutectoid, name the proeutectoid phase, and make a schematic diagram of the microstructure at a temperature just below the eutectoid temperature. This is a portion of the iron-carbon phase diagram that we have been talking about. It looks a little bit complicated, but do not worry, we are going to take it step by step. In this phase diagram, the x-axis is the composition in the weight percentage of carbon, while the y-axis is the temperature. At the left vertical axis of the phase diagram, which is 100% of pure iron, upon heating, it will experience two changes in crystal structure before it melts. At room temperature, the stable form is called alpha ferrite, has a BCC crystal structure. Ferrite experiences polymorphic transformation to FCC austenite, or sometimes we call it gamma ferrite, at 912 degrees Celsius. This austenite persists to 1394 degrees Celsius, at which temperature the FCC austenite reverts back to BCC phase, known as delta ferrite, which finally melts at 1538 degrees Celsius. You may note that the composition axis in the phase diagram extends only to 6.7 weight% carbon. In this concentration, the intermediate compound iron carbide, or sometimes we call it cementite, is formed, which is represented by vertical line at the right of the phase diagram. The reason the phase diagram extends only to 6.7 weight% is because, in practice, all steels and cast iron have carbon content less than 6.7 weight%, with steels content less than 2.14 weight% of carbon, while cast iron content between 2.14 to 6.7 weight% of carbon. So now you know about the different regions of the steel portion of the iron-carbon phase diagram. Let's learn about some properties of these single-phase regions so that we can learn about their applications. Alpha ferrite, which you know what it is already, with BCC crystal structure, only small concentration of carbon are soluble. The maximum solubility is 0.022 weight% at 727 degrees Celsius. This limited solubility is explained by the shape and the size of the BCC interstitial position, which make it difficult to accommodate the carbon atoms. Even though present in relatively low concentration, carbon significantly influences the mechanical properties of ferrite. Ferrite is relatively soft, and it may be made magnetic at temperature below 768 degrees Celsius. The maximum solubility of carbon in austenite or gamma ferrite with FCC crystal structure is 2.14 weight% of carbon, and it occurs at 1147 degrees Celsius. This solubility is approximately 100 times greater than the maximum for BCC ferrite, because the FCC interstitial positions are larger, and therefore the strains imposed on the surrounding iron atoms are much lower. The phase transformation involving austenite are very important in the heat treatment of steels. In passing, it should be mentioned that austenite is non-magnetic. The delta ferrite is virtually the same as alpha ferrite, with BCC crystal structure, except for the range of the temperature that they exist. Because delta ferrite is stable only at relatively high temperature, it is of no technological importance, and it is not further discussed. Cementite with orthorhombic crystal structure is formed when the solubility limit of carbon in alpha ferrite is exceeded below 727 degrees Celsius. Cementite also coexists with austenite between 727 to 1147 degrees Celsius. Mechanically, cementite is very hard and brittle. Cementite is only metastable, that is, it will remain as a compound indefinitely at room temperature. However, if it is heated to between 650 to 700 degrees Celsius for several years, it will gradually transform into alpha ferrite and carbon. In the iron-carbon phase diagram, there are several main reactions that we need to know. One of them is the eutectic reaction, which occurs at 4.3 weight% of carbon and at 1147 degrees Celsius. For this eutectic reaction, upon cooling, the liquid solidified to form austenite and cementite phases. It may be noted that a eutectoid invariant point exists at a composition of 0.76 weight% of carbon and at a temperature of 727 degrees Celsius. For this eutectoid reaction, upon cooling, the solid austenite phase is transformed into alpha ferrite and cementite. The eutectoid phase changes are very important, being fundamental to the heat treatment of steel. Consider, for example, an alloy of eutectoid composition, which is 0.76 weight% carbon, as it is cooled from temperature within the gamma phase region, say 1000 degrees Celsius, and moving down to 600 degrees Celsius. Initially, the alloy is composed entirely of the austenite phase. As the alloy is cooled, no changes will occur until the eutectoid temperature is reached. Upon crossing this temperature, the austenite transforms into alternating layer of alpha ferrite and cementite, which is called pearlite. Mechanically, pearlite has properties intermediate between soft and ductile ferrite and hard and brittle cementite. During the eutectoid transformation, as shown in the previous slide, the composition of austenite, which is 0.76 weight% of carbon, is different from the product phases, which are ferrite with 0.022 weight% and cementite with 6.7 weight%. Hence, the phase transformation requires a redistribution of the carbon by diffusion. These figures show the direction of carbon diffusion, which are indicated by arrows. It can be seen that carbon atoms diffuse away from ferrite region and move to the carbon-rich cementite layers to form pearlite. Next, we will discuss about the hypo and hypereutectoid. As we know that the eutectoid composition is 0.76 weight% carbon. Hypereutectoid steel is the steel that contains less than 0.76 weight% carbon, which is to the left of the eutectoid composition, as presented by C0 in the diagram. At about 1000 degrees Celsius, the microstructure will consist entirely of gamma phase. In cooling to alpha and gamma phase region, both these phases will coexist. Most of the small alpha particles will form along the original gamma grain boundaries, and the alpha ferrite formed before eutectoid temperature is called pro-eutectoid ferrite. Further cooling to temperature just before the eutectoid temperature will produce an increased fraction of the alpha phase. As the temperature is lowered just below the eutectoid temperature, or the gamma phase will transform to pearlite. Hypereutectoid still contains between 0.76 and 2.14% of carbon, which is to the right of the eutectoid composition as presented by C1 in the diagram. At 1000 degrees Celsius, the microstructure will consist entirely of gamma phase. Upon cooling into gamma and cementite phase, the cementite phase will begin to form along the initial gamma grain boundaries. The cementite is called proeutectoid cementite. Further cooling to just above the eutectoid temperature will produce an increased fraction of the cementite phase. As temperature is lowered through the eutectoid, all remaining austenite is converted into pearlite. We have now covered the learning objective for iron-carbon phase diagram. Here are some questions to help you to check your learning for today. And we are going to look at the time and temperature dependencies of the phase transformation next week. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.